Hello again, it's Tara Brabazon and welcome to Core 1 Part C. You're nearly through the first core. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have hit examination time. Let's get crunchy. So, examination is the crucial moment of a PhD program. And when I supervise in my first meeting, I talk about the examination at the start. Always begin with the end in mind. The end is an outstanding examination. So we talk about it all the way through the candidature, including at the start. So what I do with my PhD students is I make them read a successful PhD. Week 1, they go away and they actually read the genre, the oeuvre, they get a vibe, they get a sense of what a PhD actually is. I also ask them to write down the names of 5 prospective examiners. Now, the names of those examiners are not actually for me to consider as examiners. We'll come back to that in a second. It's actually for them. What I get them to do is think about 5 examiners that they would love to look at their work. I get them to write those 5 names on a card and put it on their office, put it in their study, so whenever they're writing, they have an audience for their work. They're talking to a particular audience. That helps them a lot. Why examination matters is it is the moment of quality assurance in a doctoral program. It is the moment where we know that our students are working at international standard. Therefore, it matters enormously. And there are particular characteristics of examiners. Firstly, they must be external to the university. By the way, that makes our system, of course, as we all know, a bit different from North America and also from the UK. Our examiners must also be of international standing, confirmed through publications. They must be an expert in the particular field of the thesis and also an experienced supervisor and an experienced examiner. They also must be impartial. So there must be no bias or conflict of interest. And just to clarify, a conflict of interest is not in and of itself a challenge as long as it is logged and discussed. So I'm very happy if colleagues out there have a supposed case of conflict of interest, do sit with me and we'll talk through strategies whereby that could be resolved, okay? I know there is a tendency, particularly at Flinders, I think, to ask students who they would like to be their examiners. I would be incredibly wary of doing this. I spend months digitally stalking prospective examiners. I'm prepared to admit this out here, out loud, out proud. I stalk them for months. I am incredibly rigorous. I am incredibly conservative and careful in the selection of examiners. I want the best in the world in their field. That's what I want, but I also need to make sure they're not weird. Weird examiners do a lot of damage. So you can check for weird online. You really can. Most online environments are pretty weird, so if there's weird stuff there, team, you'll find it. So just watch weird. Let me explain a little bit of why I'm so conservative and careful in the discussion of examiners. And I always think one of the great challenges in supervision and examination, and my husband is Professor Steve Redhead, and Steve and I have recorded a lot of podcasts on these issues. If colleagues are interested, I'll send you on the links. But I think one of the greatest challenges for supervisors and examiners is how do you know what is at standard for a doctoral thesis? I'll repeat that again. How do you know what is at standard for a PhD? So have a think about that now. You're reading your students what you think it might be the last draft of a PhD. You're reading that. How do you know that that's going to pass? Where are you getting that information? Where are you getting that judgment? And of course, this is intensely scholarly. This is an intensely professional judgment, particularly if you haven't examined many theses yourself. How are you going to know that the student's going to get through? The answer is, and there's lots of ways to help you through this, you've read many successful PhD, so you've spent time in the library and gone, all right, that's at standard, that's at standard, that's at standard, so you've benchmarked yourself, but also you are research active. So in other words, you are working in the refereed literature, you understand what's going on in the field. But can I just say, Steve and I talk about this a lot. I think it is important that we start to talk about these discussions in a really clear fashion. I mean, there's training for everything at a university, and yet think about how little training there is to say, oh right, is this PhD student at standard? Is this thesis going to get through? Or as an examiner, how do you determine what is a pass and what is a fail? You've got to have a sense in your head about that pass line for a PhD. How do you know it's above the line? How do you know it's below the line? Okay, once you've got that one in place, how do you know that that thesis is major corrections and that thesis is a minor correction? And finally, of course, how do you know where the line is for straight through, no corrections, and minor corrections? Do you know what examiners are looking for? Now, if you're a bit shaky on any of those questions, and I've been provocative to try and sort of get you thinking, oh, do I know? Do I know? That's the whole point. If you're shaky about those sort of standards, what possible information could your doctoral candidates have about those standards? So if you're letting them pick examiners, how do they know where the pass-fail line is? So when academics listen to their PhD students and their choices, and I think it is important to listen, you must then impose your professional judgment over those choices. Students certainly have an opportunity to object, and you must listen to what they're saying to you, but you must choose wisely. If you choose badly, or if you submit an undercooked thesis, you will destroy somebody's life. No pressure. Yeah. So remember, once the examiner has been approached, you have to step away from the vehicle. No communication is possible with the examiners. If you do, it's null and void, and it creates all sorts of traumas for this office. So once the examination is in place, back away. Back away for me, and then we'll inform you when all those protocols are in place. So please recommend your examiners wisely, please. And they then have 8 weeks to read the thesis and report back. So once the, I'm sure, glowing reports are back in the university, there are some final steps that I would like to help you with if possible. Now, most reports recommend minor or major corrections. Don't be disappointed as a new supervisor if the reports come back with minor or major corrections. Most theses come back with minor or major corrections. So you've done well, don't judge yourself. But then where I would judge you is the speed at which the corrections are made. Far too many students, supervisors and theses sort of sit languishing for days, weeks and, oh my goodness me, months where the corrections are not being made. You know what I would do, to be honest? The day the reports come in, buy your student a cup of coffee, congratulate them on what they've done, but the pair of you sit there and you write down a list of the corrections to be made. Do it the day the reports arrive, and then give the student a timeline to finish it. And just, if this helps you too, this helped my students enormously. When they're making corrections, remember the key is they're simply addressing what the examiner says. They're not agreeing with the examiner, but when the examiner is locating something of interest or of issue, the student must address it. And addressing it is very different from correcting it. So understand those differences, but get the student to get those corrections through quickly so that they get their life back, yeah? So at that point, once the corrections have gone through and everybody's cool, the student can then, yes, graduate, and they have a right to celebrate, and wow, so do you. As I always say, and I've said it a few times through these core gigs, supervision is a privilege. It's not a right. We are building the future of knowledge. We are building the future of universities, one candidate at a time. It is really the greatest legacy that we leave to higher education. It is our greatest legacy. And I thank you for spending the time with me as we've been working through Core 1, and I'll see you in Core 2, and I'll see you during our workshops. But thank you for your time. You're fab. Cheers.